because all the traditional academic insights are about disaffiliation, how people are becoming more and more irreligious.
Right.
But I think spirituality is an interesting term. A lot depends on what, for
Yeah.
the students who said yes,
Yeah.
I think a lot of what they think is like some kind of hybrid, esoteric mishmash of like, Instagram accounts that they might be following,
Yeah.
or something to do with their parents' religion, like traditions that they have been sort of
Right.
following. So yeah, I think a lot depends on what I would have liked to see. The follow-up question, which is, what do you mean by spirituality? That you're saying yes.
What does it mean to be spiritual? When I was a senior, there was a survey done at my high school. The question was simple. It was whether or not spirituality was important to the students. And about 70% of us said yes. But according to that same survey, only about 20% of the students actually took part in any spiritual, faith, or religious-based groups. Now, spirituality isn't something that's only practiced in these group settings. It can be practiced in many ways, by many different people. But if spirituality is different for all of us, then what does it even mean to be spiritual in the first place? Today, I asked this question to Dr. Swayam Bagaria, the assistant professor of Hindu studies at Harvard Divinity School, and a thinker whose work bridges religion, culture, spirituality, and belief. He has spent years exploring the complexity of belief systems and their impact on everything from individual well-being to modern public life. His definition of spirituality is, in many ways, an original one. Now, many of us live in this modern, materialistic, technological, scientific world. I do it. Questions like, what's your GPA? What college are you going to? Did you get the new iPhone? And so on. But our psychology and mental state, our well-being, is grounded not by those things, but by our understanding of ourselves. Something that can only be fully defined by an understanding of our spirituality, our culture, and our core beliefs. Who are we when everything around us is stripped away? My name is Yuvan Rasev, and every 2 weeks I sit down with people from all walks of life who have something meaningful to offer. Lessons, stories, and honest reflection on personal growth. Now, these conversations aren't about finding all the answers. They're about learning from people who've lived through moments of loss, change, and renewal. Welcome to Lived Words. So I want to start with a story. When I was in senior year at Phillips Exeter, we had a student leadership meeting. All the student leaders and the director of multicultural affairs came and talked to us and talked about how when kids apply to Exeter, there's like a form that goes out and it's how much do you care about spirituality, or how big is spirituality in your life? Is it important to you? And like 80% of students said spirituality is important to them. And we have like a dozen, maybe more spiritual groups of all different kinds. And you can create one if it doesn't feel like something fits, right? Fairly easily, like so many. And it's like 30% of the student body is actually in the spiritual groups. Thoughts on why that is? Why do people feel this like I'm spiritual, but they don't actually do the participation, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's a very weird question to ask like a 17-year-old, which is how important is spirituality? Because I often consider it to be like an acquired taste, and the acquisition comes from having lived enough of a life for one to become spiritual. Because in most cases, if you look at young adults, then I think their relation to religion is antagonistic because most of what they do has just been transmitted to them by the parents.
Right.
And often religion becomes one of like the battlegrounds to sort of individuate yourself or to separate yourself away from what your parents taught you.
Right.
So So it's interesting for me that 80% number. Clearly, right now, I think there is a little bit of a churn happening.
Right.
Because all the traditional academic insights are about disaffiliation, how people are becoming more and more irreligious.
Right.
But I think spirituality is an interesting term. I think a lot depends on what that word means for
Yeah.
the students who said yes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what they think is like some kind of hybrid, esoteric mishmash of Instagram accounts that they might be following,
Yeah.
or something to do with their parents' religion, like traditions that they have been sort of
Right.
following. So yeah, I think a lot depends on what like I would have liked to see the follow-up question, which is, what do you mean by spirituality that you are saying yes to it? Otherwise, it's a little hard for me to grasp my mind around
Sure.
that particular number. 80% is very, very high
Yeah.
for
It is.
17-year-olds. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you feel like spirituality is subjective then, in terms of how we define it as individuals?
It can be subjective, but it's not completely subjective in the sense that I do think that clearly it has to do a lot with your own relationship to your own life and the way in which you think about your place in the totality of the world.
Yep.
But I think the paths are not subjective. The paths are often I think there is a range of them. There is I think multiple ways of becoming spiritual, but I don't see very many people being so idiosyncratic in their spirituality that they create a path that is completely unrecognizable to other people. So I think the paths might be they're laid out beforehand.
Right.
But I do think that the relationship that one bears to that path might have arisen because of a history of idiosyncrasies of that particular person,
Right.
who might have encountered that path in some particular way, or when they were going through something in their life
Right.
that made them spiritually inclined, I would say.
Got it.
Yeah.
You mentioned that spirituality and the connection to parents. I think that's a big thing. Right? Often we, as growing up, what we learn about spirituality, about culture, about religion, all those things are what we've been told, right? As kids, and people often grow up. I think, and for me, as a Hindu, I grew up. My parents were Hindu, and so I was Hindu, and it was somewhat of a progression, right? And I think it took me until I was much older to understand what that meant. And to actually know if I wanted to be Hindu. It wasn't something that as a kid, right? You kind of just follow whatever your parents tell you. I think that makes it so interesting because it's would it be fair to say that I'm spiritual if I'm really just following what I'm told? Am I really spiritual? What do I have to do to be spiritual? If saying I'm spiritual make me spiritual?
Yeah, it's a little bit like, you know it when you see it. And this is, I think it comes individually for each people. I think you grow into it often. The religious scaffolding might be the same. So you might end up doing the same things that your parents have taught you, but you will do them in a way in which it would be more spiritually motivated.
Right.
And I think that changes over the course of one's life.
Right.
I think the problem with the parents' transmission of religious practices and traditions to their children is, I think that it leads to, because parents have lived a life, they have come into, and again, I'm sure that they might be doing the same thing that their parents or your grandparents sort of taught them, but it requires a cumulative set of experiences for you to realize how some of those things can become important to you.
Yep.
So parents, they are in this dilemma in which they have realized the importance of something that is completely that will not make much sense to the children unless the children have also lived a life to some degree akin to their parents. So they are transmitting something without saying why is it that, or without being able to say why this is important.
Sure.
And I think that's where the mismatch happens.
Yeah.
So you might have the same religious traditions that you are practicing right now, but my sense is that, or my guess is that you will become more spiritually inclined within those traditions as you go and progress with your life.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, and maybe in some sense, parents have their own spiritual ideas because of their lived experience,
Yeah.
right? Their lives.
Yeah.
And so they think about things a certain way because of how they've experienced life,
Yeah.
right? And then they teach that to their kids, even though the kids don't have the experience that is the context of their thought process. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have this sort of, I've always had this thought that like religion is like a 40-plus-year-old matter always. Like you need a lot of like broken dreams, like paths not taken, like failed sort of ambitions for you to become inclined in that direction. I
Yeah.
think when you're a child, everything, the world seems to be like your oyster, right? So there is something about the way in which life seems to be so open-ended when you are 17 or 18 or 22 or 25 that does not gel well with the spiritual realizations that your parents might have had after they have gone through that entire process of like sort of wanting things from life but not getting them as they had wanted them.
Yeah.
And I think that is a very essential ingredient for me, I think, to think about what spirituality is. Religion, on the other hand, I think, as I said, it's different, right?
Yes.
In most cases, in religions, you don't need to believe in something. You need to accept that a belief is possible. And that is more than enough for you to actually participate in it. So, for example, I went to temples. My parents knew very well that I did not believe in many things. But they were like, that's fine. You don't have to. You just come, Like there's like belief is like a sliding scale thing. It's not like a yes or no.
Right.
It's like, oh, are you willing to accept that there is such a belief? That's it. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And again, once you're in it, your intensity or your degree of strength of belief might increase. It might decrease. It might remain the same.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter because then you're in it for other reasons besides the belief.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So to stay on spirituality for a moment,
Yeah.
I think there's something interesting that I want to connect with what you're saying. The idea that our parents' idea of spirituality, concept of spirituality, come from their own experiences, right?
Mhm.
Our concept of spirituality come from our parents in the beginning because that's what we're told. As we grow older and we have our own lived experience, we realize that what our parents have taught us doesn't align the same way, right? Because we're living different lives and in different worlds, and the world is different, and cultures are different, and religions are different. And so then we construct our own spiritual understanding around those similar concepts, maybe around those similar themes that kind of were ingrained in us. But we almost wrap another layer of context around that to make it make sense for us and our lives.
Yeah, I think both are possible in some ways. I think it's when you become older, you can reconstruct your own set of practices and spiritual inclinations as you think is appropriate or befitting to your life.
Yeah.
But I think you will still do that with a more empathetic eye towards the way in which your parents did it. So it will not seem as hard-coded to you as it might have seemed when you were a young adult, when essentially, your entire life could have been seen as some kind of a struggle against sort of prescriptive practices that your parents might have suggested, which you just did not want to do.
Yeah.
So I think in all culture, in the process of transmission gets reconstructed. There's never like a neat transmission, but I think the reconstruction is a part of the maintenance of all beliefs.
Yeah.
It's just that, there is a very famous quote by an anthropologist, which basically, Jean Pouillon, a French anthropologist, he has this thing, only the non-believer believes that the believer believes.
Only the non-believer
Believes that the believer believes. Right. Like, it's only in the non-believer's head that the belief is so strong in the minds of the believer. Most people who have religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs, they hold it very lightly with a lot of margin. And I think transmission of culture or religion, it allows for that leeway. It allows for that elbow room, that things can be reconstructed. And I'm not saying that all beliefs subsist, all beliefs are maintained. A lot of them do die out.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are also, they remain remarkably stable through very long timelines.
Right.
And I think that's not because we have become suddenly more I don't know, free thinking, and like all the older people were just like,
Yeah.
like robots transmitting beliefs from one generation to the next.
Right.
I think that reconstruction has always been a part of the transmission of cultural traditions.
Got it.
And that applies to the younger generation right now as well. So you could very well reconstruct the things or reconstruct your own set of preferences in a way which might not match your parents. But my guess is that they might also not be that far from it.
Mm.
It can't be like so completely like, unless, I don't know, you're having like a very elongated adolescence in which like when you're 40, you're still fighting your parents' sort of,
Right.
thing that your parents did to you when you were young.
Right.
And that could be the case, and a lot of
Right.
people have that. But I think that becomes very passé very quickly as you grow older.
Mm. I think there's this pursuit of individuality that happens when we're young, of wanting to be independent, right? Wanting
Yeah,
to be
sure.
to separate oneself a little bit,
Yeah.
right? To grow into oneself, as an individual person and not, as necessarily only as a part of the family. And I think that somewhat speaks to what you're saying, where it's those values that ideas that you've kind of grown up with, you try to like push away from them a little bit, just to see.
Of course, yeah.
Just to see what else is there, and
Yeah.
then connect them, and then, as you said, but you don't push so far that you lose them, because as you get older, almost. I think that what happens for a lot of people is that they reconnect, right? They reconnect with what their past beliefs and their past ideas.
Yeah, I think that's right. That in the sense that individuality arises because of experimentation, because
Yes.
of some kind of,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't even call it individuality. I think you can be an individual in many ways. I would call it like just increasing optionality for yourself, which is that you're creating options for yourself that might not be coincident with the ones that your parents have tried to transmit to you.
Yeah.
And, I think increasing optionality is one way of thinking about keeping your life open-ended.
Yeah.
But again, with time, that increasing optionality might not be the best way of thinking about what your life path should be. And I think that's where essentially you start consolidating more, I would say, than just keeping life completely open-ended. I mean, I would love to keep my life open-ended, but I do think that there are certain things that I just need to commit to after a certain point of time. And I think that's where you consolidate as opposed to experiment all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why? Why can you not stay open-ended forever and always be experimenting?
Because the world is not made that way. The world is not made for endless experimentation throughout the timeline of your life. I think the world is mostly, like there are certain things that you're supposed, like benchmarks. There are like things that you have to do. People will view you differently when you are a 30-year-old, when you're a 40-year-old.
Sure.
That's not to say that there are no places where this kind of absolute sort of unanchored way of living is still prevalent. I'm pretty sure there are.
Yeah.
Berlin comes to mind, for example. But in most cases, I think that the battery of options will automatically become limited as you see some of them failing. And that's, there's a kind of organic process of life where just by the dint of some options not being available anymore, you are forced to choose certain things. And I think that's where, you start consolidating. You might as well accept then at that point what life is just offering you.
Yes.
So I think there's a certain like organic process through which life will determine that kind of closure of certain kinds of options of life. But I also think that it comes from just, the world is not made for people to become continually self-transcending throughout the trajectory of their life. Maybe it's there in the future, but as of now, I think it's mostly a fantasy for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the idea of religion and of belief and that sort of concept is something that we as human beings have created to some extent, right? Curated, in order to give us this almost like a purpose, right? Or to, understand things that we cannot grasp, at least at this time. And I think it's interesting because it almost feels like a natural evolution that at some point, in order to really grasp reality, you have to have certain beliefs, because otherwise there will always be this kind of gray area that's is kind of unnamed and has all these different things in it. But if you can put that into a belief, and that becomes a religion, and that becomes a concept of thought, where it's not concrete still, right? But you can understand it conceptually because you've given it a name, essentially. I think that is important for us as growth, as human beings, because it allows us to open up our thinking differently when you don't have this almost clutter, it feels, right? Of like all of these different things.
Yeah.
And you can kind of shape your all that thinking and all those questions and all those thoughts and all those uncertainties into a belief, into believing in something.
Yeah, I mean, just because we create religion does not mean it's an illusion. Like, I think that's the
Absolutely.
sort of the mistake people make. We create a lot of things that we don't consider illusions.
Yeah.
And we are very happy with that. I think, yes, there's a certain self-projection quality that religion brings. And for me, that self-projection quality comes from the fact that in most cases, people all across the world and all across history, they have never been content to see themselves as just functioning in this small part or small piece of the world, while not having imagination about what the world as a total unit looks like.
Yes.
Right. It's a way of projecting their own sort of sense of themselves onto a more macrocosmic level that religion always sort of helps mediate. So religion inserts you into the story that you tell about the universe, which is not just a story of your little corner of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that this impulse, this self-projecting impulse, has been there across cultures. It's been there across time. And one can call it purpose. One can call it one's place in the world. One can call it all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
But I do think that it helps to determine what exactly is our life about. It helps to determine, because if you were to live in a world, and I think this is not me saying per se, but a lot of other people have noticed this, that were completely anarchic, and all you had to do was concern yourself with your proximate environment, chances are that that will not be enough for you to sustain a certain direction in your life. And I think you need that self-projecting capacity.
Yeah.
And I think the difference is that we can think of it as an illusion.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of, for example, like the new atheists will sort of think in that particular manner.
Yeah.
But I think there's something more to that than just an illusion. And that self-projecting capacity, it's an interesting thing to understand.
Yeah. There's something that I spoke to Dr. Mark Kielberger about, the idea of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And being separate from happiness or sadness and emotions that are volatile, but fulfillment as in a way of living, in a way of, he talks about living one's legacy, so living the legacy that you want to leave behind. And I think in some ways this is part of that, where it's fulfillment comes from having a why, having a purpose, feeling like you belong. You talked about finding your place in the world, right? On a broader scope than like my place in my community. What is my place in the universe? Well, we don't know, but religion can explain it, right? To some extent, because we have stories and tales and we create these beautiful story arcs and ideas through religion that explain us and everything around us. And I think that's important, right? To understanding ourselves.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and at some point, I think it's just a really rich archive of character types, of stories, of personalities, of pathways that people have followed.
Yeah.
That forms a lot of the scaffolding for understanding what moves people.
Hmm.
Even at the most bare minimum, it provides a lot of motivational sort of energy
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
the way in which people conduct their lives.
Yeah.
And I think that ignoring it would just make us very unimaginative about
Yeah.
how people actually live their lives.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is also like, when you were talking about living your life's legacy,
Yes.
I think there is one quote that I often there's one idea which I really like. It's from the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm.
And it basically says, it's a shloka. It says, it is better to live your own dharma imperfectly than to live somebody else's dharma perfectly. And like a commonsensical way of translating that would
Yeah.
be, nobody else can live your life for you.
Right.
Right. So whatever it is that your life ends up being, that's what you have to live out into the world.
Yeah.
And I think just that realization as well, which is the ownness of one's life, it sort of provides, it's similar to what you were saying about living one's legacy, which is that at some point one has to accept that that's all like that's all you have, which is your own life to live.
Yeah.
And that for me is a religious insight.
Yeah.
It's not an insight that that can come without some kind of spiritual calling.
Sure.
And how is it that you determine what is the provenance of your life is then becomes the more interesting question.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, you can sort of think about life as creating endless optionality when you're 18. But I think at some point, it'll become more than just maintaining all kinds of options for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where religion sort of enters from the back door, I would say.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. I think there's another, and to that same quote that you cited, the idea of living, that you cannot, not living someone else's dharma, living your own dharma as a purpose, right? Living your life.
Yeah.
Living your life and not someone else's. I think sometimes we, especially in the world of social media and internet and connection, and we're all connected and everyone can see what everyone else is doing, and it's like everybody wants to be someone that maybe they are not. And we see people on the internet and we're like, I want to be like that person, I want to be like that person. And there's a place for comparison, I think, right? And evaluation in ways to make ourselves better and improvement. There's a place for that. But sometimes we get so caught up in trying to be other people and to live other people's stories, right? That we forget that our story and our place in the world is equally valuable, right? And has its own journey, and we will have our own journey. And you'll never be somebody else, frankly, right?
Yeah.
And there's no point in trying to be somebody else. You can be yourself.
Yeah. And the other thing is that you never know enough about somebody else for you to be able to compare yourself to them.
Yes.
Right.
That's very true.
Even things like, when you're envious of another person, it requires a huge dint of imagination on your part for you to accept that the other person has no problems and you want their life exactly as it is.
Yeah.
Right. The only person who you should benchmark yourself against is yourself.
Right.
In some ways. So for me, you can think of life, and you were asking about spirituality. For me, spirituality is essentially self-transcending experiences. How is it that you keep on transcending whatever it is that your version of the self is right now? So for example, it can happen through just basic learning. Let's say you go to eat tomorrow or yesterday to a nice restaurant and you liked a dish. Just go and find out more about that dish. There's a certain kind of continuous evolution that can just be about your own life, that has nothing to do with comparison whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard. And you said social media.
Yeah.
So much of what we do is mimicry. So much of what we do is imitation. So much of what we do is so much of what we do is just is done by accounting for what other people might think about the thing that we are doing.
Yes.
We are anticipating their gaze in some ways, but I do think that ultimately, as I said, nobody else can live your life for you, right? You might as well just make it easier on yourself by not comparing yours to other people around you.
Yeah.
It's just because they will not be living your life.
Yep.
You might be doing the thing that they might be doing. Nevertheless, that does not mean that your lives are the same. It can't be, the set of experiences that have formed you, the set of memories that you have, the set of circumstances with which you have had to dealt with, can never ever completely coincide with somebody else's.
Yes.
We have our own sort of, in some ways, karmic storehouses, and we have to deal with that baggage.
Yes.
And I think comparing or comparison does not really help there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Would you consider yourself to be spiritual?
Yes.
Why?
So I think the reason why I think I consider myself to be spiritual is because I'm constantly looking, maybe this is not the right way to put it, to jeopardize my life as it is.
Oh, great.
There's a certain kind of trust in my own self and in the world that I have that allows me to be a little bit risque in my approach to my life, that I think comes from a deep spiritual acceptance.
Sure.
So that's what I would consider spiritual about me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's almost like a sense of and do you almost feel like maybe it's a sense of things that almost like things that are going to happen are meant to happen, and so if this is meant to not work, then it won't work.
Yeah.
So I might as well try type of thing.
It's a little bit of that. Like there's a certain kind of like, just see what works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
But also I think, it comes from, so if I have to think about what am I attached to, so for me, the only thing that I'm attached to is if I feel as if I am in attunement with the world around me. And I think that is something like a spiritual, I would say, quality.
Yeah.
Like constantly trying to hear what is being asked of me, both from within and from without, and seeing if I'm meeting the moment.
Right.
And if I feel as if I am in, like things are not working for me, as you said, I'm very happy to let them go without having a second thought about them.
Interesting.
It comes from a certain trust that everything will work out.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a hard thing to have, I think, for many people. To really believe that like I'll be fine. Right?
Yeah,
It's almost like I'll be fine.
it's also like a kind of like a confidence in my own sort of set of qualities and the things like I bring to the table.
Yeah.
I think it's spiritual, but it's also just like a big bet on myself.
Sure.
Because I know what I'm capable of, and I don't need, like, I know whatever it is that happens, it's all okay. There's nothing that was not meant to happen that did not happen.
Yeah. Has that always been a mentality?
No.
How did we get
I was
there?
a lot more neurotic until like 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know, just, it's like, again, I think these things are very tacit. Like, they happen very imperceptibly.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is to just be on the lookout for when they are happening. Because in most cases, I think people usually shut things out from within themselves. So, one of the things that I've always believed is that we are all capable of a lot more than what we think we are capable of.
Yeah.
And often, when people think that, so for me, we often obscure ourselves from our own latent potentials. The challenge for me is that when something like a potential is emerging, keep the door open. Don't shut it just because it doesn't chime with your life as it is right now, or your whatever job that you're doing, or your career trajectory that you have already chalked out. Let it be, let it simmer, and then see if, something becomes of that with time. And the other thing is that I only trust time. Like for me, I don't trust any thought that I have unless I've had that thought for like 2 years almost.
Interesting. Okay.
2 years is just a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
But because I have a deep suspicion of what is my own thinking or what is my own feeling. As you said, people are so prone to mimicry and imitation.
Yeah.
I have to have some test that this is something that I actually care about.
Right.
So I usually, it's like basically I window shop, my own thoughts a lot.
Yeah.
They're in my shopping cart. I never buy them
Yeah.
unless they buy themselves to some degree. And I think I think similarly about my own thoughts as well. So for me, that is again, like it comes from a certain spiritual acceptance of what I am, what I think I'm capable of, and what I think the world is. The world is huge, I always think that at least everybody's life should basically be about being a part of as much of the world as possible. And I don't mean traveling or like any of those silly things. I mean that there's so like this, and this is the anthropologist in me. Like I did my PhD in anthropology, and I think there's only one correct conclusion of an anthropological training, which is it's not getting a job. It's everything in the world should fascinate you, regardless of how stupid, how irrational do you think it might be. It should fascinate you.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say that the world is a huge place, because there's so much of fascinating things happening in it all the time. And I would like to be a part of as much of it as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I see my own life.
Yeah. Even though you'll never be part of all of it because it's too much.
Of course not. Yeah. You can't even be a part of all the things that is happening in your own neighborhood.
Yes.
But I do think that, you
it's the
ought to
desire.
make yourself, available to to as much of the world as possible.
Yes. Do you believe in the afterlife?
I don't not believe in it.
Okay.
Which again.
Sure.
Yeah.
So then you are kind of in between in that sliding scale of belief.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm happy. Like I'm a very non-committal person when it comes to any belief.
That's
right. So I'm non-committal about this as well.
Yes.
Which is my way of saying I don't know.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair. I ask because I think sometimes people who have a belief in an afterlife and the idea of heaven, it gives a sense of comfort when it comes to some of the things that you're talking about in terms of taking risks and putting yourself into situations that maybe are not the most conservative, I suppose.
Sure.
Right? I think that gives us a sense of security of like, if I'm doing the right things, then, and obviously not that you're going to die in most of the situations, but even that idea that if I'm doing the right things, there's a reward, right? In a sense. And if I don't, then there's a punishment.
Yeah.
It gives some people a sense of peace and a sense of a baseline almost. Like the worst comes to worst, I'll make it into heaven because I did all the right things. So I'm curious, is that a foundation for yours? But
actually, so so you can have whatever it is that I said about the world or about my own life without having any of the belief in the afterlife. You don't need that to anchor any of the way in which I think about my life now. And here's my sense is that that kind of accounting perspective on the afterlife is not how most people think about the afterlife. It's a lot more ambiguous than that. Because if you were actually accounting for, like how is it that I can gain a reward in the afterlife?
Yeah.
Chances are you'll become very neurotic in this life.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying that people are not neurotic. They can be. They often are.
Yeah.
There is this very famous book by one of the founding father of sociology, Max Weber, who wrote about Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. He basically talks about how the indeterminacy, or whether you are the chosen one in Calvinism, can lead to this accounting perspective on your own life right now. And why is it that capitalism grew from that particular? And again, his argument in some ways is not completely correct.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting perspective. But I usually think that afterlife, for me, I never think of it in an accounting way.
Yeah.
I do think of it in just a very elementary way, which is like a non-materialist way, which is that there's something about us that might not be extinguished with death,
Yes.
and that's it. And even that belief, I don't hold it. I'm non-committal to it, as I said.
Yeah.
But anything to do with rewards or punishment, like a kind of like jurisprudential view of afterlife, is not something that I concern myself with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
For me, that accounting happens within this life in some ways.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are spiritual.
Yes.
Would you consider yourself to be religious?
Not really.
Okay.
I am, however, like I will never like I'm very happy with people working with whatever it is that is working for them. Like I'm not going to go and belabor to them about
Yes.
religion. A lot of like like
Yes.
we are adults here. Like a lot of
Yes.
people are like, oh, how do you believe in God? Or
Yes.
this sounds irrational, and that's just like so petty, so adolescent, and so petulant for me.
Yeah.
So but I myself would not consider myself religious. I don't think I'm religious.
I ask, it's interesting because in some ways you teach religion, right?
Yeah.
You teach Hindu studies.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me for you to teach a religion and yet not be religious. How does that work?
In fact, I think it's the exact way in which it works. Like you can teach things only when you are aware in a very nuanced way about the gradient of religiosity that is available in the world.
Yeah.
Often people who don't teach it might just be revealing their own biases about antagonism towards, or not, and maybe indifference towards it. But I also teach the contemplative sides of Hinduism.
Yeah.
So mostly things around yoga, psychotherapy,
Yeah.
philosophy of mind, and I think that entire part of Hinduism, which is the more contemplative side, it has a kind of intellectual independence from the theological side of Hinduism,
Yeah.
which it's not like a controversial statement that I'm making.
Yes.
So it's acknowledged
Yes.
amongst people and amongst scholars that and within Hinduism you have a school of atheism as well.
Yes.
It's not like I think Hinduism has heterogeneity within it, and but yes, I don't teach theology.
Yes.
So that for
Got
me
it.
is I do teach an anthropological perspective
Right.
on Hinduism. I do teach the contemplative science stuff,
Right.
but I don't teach theology.
Right. Got it. Can we talk for a moment about, and you touched on this earlier,
Yeah.
but the difference between spirituality and religion?
No.
Because I think often we associate them to be the same or similar.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways they are,
Yeah.
but not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that if you go and ask those students in your school,
Yes.
are they religious? 80% will not say yes.
I
And
agree.
again, I think the difference is that I think spirituality has more to do, is a dimension of religion, but is not exhausted by it.
Yeah.
It's like you can have all the congregational stuff around religion. In fact, you often need that
Yeah.
for you to pursue your spiritual ends to their utmost, to their maximal degree possible. But they're like overlapping Venn diagram, in the sense that they share some things, but they don't have to be the same. So the way in which I think about spirituality is just like spirituality is essentially self-transcendence, which is that are you more than what you think you are right now? And religion often basically, especially like something like Christianity, will think of you as you are the imprint of the divine,
Right.
right? Or there's a kind of divine personhood within you
Yeah.
that provides you with dignity, which is much more than your human personhood. The spiritual perspective on that would be, well, you don't need to attribute anything to me, like sort of that that I've been made in God's image or anything of that sort.
Yeah.
But I think all you need to accept is that you are more than what you think you are currently. That's it. So for me, that is spirituality.
Sure.
I don't need to have a positive attribution of my sense of selfhood, which I think then becomes veers more towards religion.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's just that it's not positive, doesn't have to be negative. It's just that idea that there is
Yes,
more to you.
more to you than you think. More to you than you currently think.
Yeah.
And I think it's always true until you die.
Okay.
Even when you have self-transcended enough, like for example, you keep on self-transcending and you're 67, 68,
Sure.
you still have more to you than you think,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah.
That for me is spirituality.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily associated with like the soul or with the idea of these concrete concepts. It's you could think about spirituality even as a like it's almost like self-knowing.
Self-knowing, and you can call it, I think soul is just a placeholder for most people. Like
Right.
it's basically like when they say soul, what they mean is something that individuates me from everybody else around me.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think they mean it in a very metaphysical sense that I have there's something like a substance within me that
Yeah.
will not die when I die.
Yeah.
That's not my sense. So for me, it's just a placeholder to think about what is it about you that makes you you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what is it that makes your life as opposed to somebody else's? And that's what I think. Ideas like the soul. For example, in psychology, you often think about personality
Mm-hmm.
as a way of individuating you from other people. But I think that personality is more a combinatorial idea. Like there are 5 traits, like neuroticism, agreeableness. I think that 3, 4 more, and then they see the ratio of those 5 traits within you. Soul is more like it's. I mean, I do believe in a higher self, which is not your personality, which is not your circumstantial self, which is essentially what you are right now
Yeah.
in your life. But I do think that there is something more, but I don't have to positively describe that. I just
Okay.
need that as a aspiration for
Okay.
me to see that my current version of the self is not exhaustive. It's not
Right.
it's not the be all and the end all of me.
Right.
And I think a lot of people fall into that trap, which is like they often fortify their current versions of the self as opposed to self-transcending. And I think that's, for me, is a spiritual quality.
Right. Right. It's so interesting. I think that idea that there can be a higher self without it being a positive thing.
Yeah.
It's not something we really think about often, right? I think when people think of a higher self, it's like that's like a goal to achieve. You want to become enlightenment, right?
Yeah,
And
but
I
even
think-
all of those things are also placeholders. Like, what
Yes.
does it mean to awaken or to be enlightened?
Sure.
Right. Like, for example, when you were talking about what I teach, so I teach this text called the Yoga Sutra in a philosophy and psychology of yoga class. And that text basically describes the goal of meditation as cessations of the fluctuations of thinking.
Yeah.
Right. Which is that your mind, and this is a fairly common image, your mind is a monkey. You have to control it. You have to make it more discerning. Like, how
Right.
can you make your mind not a monkey? That's the higher goal. And that is what they will describe as liberation, as samadhi. So it's the words that people often use it can be a placeholder. Enlightenment, liberation, escape from suffering. Like
Yeah.
that's how people who think about karmic cycles view what the ultimate higher self is.
Yeah.
That your self escapes from cycles of suffering.
Right.
But I think you don't need. You can use them as placeholders. You don't need to describe them in too much detail for you to be able to have self-transcending experiences.
Sure.
The self-transcendence of the self-transcending experiences, I think, is very vast in
Yeah.
terms of like what happens to you.
Almost equally vague to the concept of self-transcendence itself. I feel.
Yeah. And I think, so like, again, people talk about all kinds of like phenomenological qualities, especially because I work on meditation and things like that. There are things like non-dual awareness, lightness of being, unity of experience, like all kinds of things that people use for you to think about ego disillusion, for you to think about how can you become aware of parts of yourself that are not currently accessible to you. But those are just like scholarly terms, right? I'm talking more from just my perspective of my own life. And I think that's self-transcendence can come in many forms. It doesn't have to come in the form of scholarship.
Right.
It can be it's nice to be packaged in that form sometimes. I think because it makes things clear. I do, but yeah, I think it's a lot more about your own sense of your own life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you think being spiritual is important for people? Like, is that something that everyone should try to pursue to be?
I think so.
Is this a medical diagnosis? No, I'm joking.
No. Yeah, I mean, it can be, but I do think that it is
Can I
important.
prescribe this to the audience?
Huh?
I'm just,
I do think that it is important, only because it, like, again, it activates parts of yourself that you did not know existed.
yes.
And I think that is important
Right.
to sort of to think about those parts of the spectrum of selfhood that you currently don't know how to channel.
Mm-hmm.
You need some idea of a self or selfhood that is not your current self, or not the conventional idea of the self that you think you are. And I think that is where spirituality becomes important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, shifting gears a little bit.
Yes.
Mental health. How does that tie into concepts of spirituality?
Again, it's a very interesting question. I think there's a lot of moving parts to that question.
Sure.
So my own work, they go in several registers. So one is essentially just thinking of spirituality as a important component of a person's cultural and psychosocial background, and then incorporating it within mental health treatment programs as they exist.
Right.
So it's more like convincing mental health providers that, hey, people are religious. You can't just ignore that part when they come to treatment. You have to incorporate it, especially in settings where degrees of religiosity is very high, like India, like 99%, 98%. So it's hard to just ignore those parts of somebody just because it does not chime very well with the way in which you have been trained in your professional practice. The second is more like, how can you think of different spiritually inclined psychotherapeutic models which are different from the ones that are used right now, like CBT or psychodynamic psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And that for me is a more interesting topic, which is how is it that you derive mental health treatment models based on principles that you can vaguely call spiritual, but from contemplative traditions like Buddhism, Hinduism, even contemplative parts of like Islam or Christianity or Judaism. For me, trying to extract those insights and package it into a psychotherapeutic model, I think is very, very interesting as a project.
Right.
It's not that this is new. There is a very famous therapy type called dialectical behavioral therapy, and most of the insights in that therapy model were based on just some elementary ideas in Buddhism.
Okay.
Like you being able to hold two contrary ideas in your mind without finding a resolution between them, right? So that's like they got that from Buddhism, and that's used a lot in specific kinds of psychotic disorders, DBT, as a way of psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So that for me is like the more interesting angle into these conversations.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you think that there is a connection between declining mental health rates, particularly among younger people, and a maybe declining or shifting kind of concepts of spirituality?
Yeah, that's a hard one to measure. Spirituality is usually very difficult to measure.
Absolutely.
Religion is easier to measure.
Yes.
And there are people who have argued that there is a connection.
Yeah.
I am
I'm asking you to be committal. I know it's hard.
skeptical a little bit about the way in which that connection is established. And first of all, the connection is not completely like unitary. So, for
Yes.
example, like you will find disaggregated insights often. So, religion can be useful for, let's say, mood disorders,
Yeah.
but religion can exacerbate OCD,
Sure.
right? Things like that.
Sure.
So, most of the insights that come out of this literature have this disaggregated quality to them.
Yeah.
I think when we think of mental health problems here, we often think of depression rates,
Yes.
right, and not OCD rates or personality disorders or things like that.
That is true.
So, if we have to hone in on the high depression rates in this country, and also remember, the mental health sort of diagnoses can have a lot of, again, this is not to, I'm not trying to dilute the extent of suffering that a lot of people are going through, but it can also have looping effects,
Yeah.
which is that people often then, one diagnosis can make them think that their entire self is about that diagnosis, right? So a diagnosis can become an identity marker very
Right.
easily. And I think we have to take those into account when we are thinking of these big numbers or depression rates and things like that.
Right.
But having said that, whether high depression rates has some connection to shifting spiritual attachments that people might have, maybe. I think there is people often think of this as a crisis of meaning.
Yeah.
I do think that
I almost feel sometimes it's a crisis of comparison, where I think we've gone so far into that comparison, like we talked about before, where maybe there's a role in which spirituality can play in taking us out of that constant comparison.
Yeah, and it's also like America is a really cutthroat society.
Yeah.
And especially the way in which things are designed for people who are in high school and in college.
Yeah.
Everything seems to be about that sort of very small gold pot that everybody is vying for, and I think, again, having that, calling that a shifting spirituality might not capture just the brutality of the competitive dynamics,
Right.
which might be about something completely different, which
Right.
is that essentially it is becoming a place where people are willing to sort of pay a lot such that their children can have a few available opportunities because they think those are the only ones that can get them the life
Yeah.
that would be classified as being successful.
Right.
And I think that is a feature of America. Like, for example, I don't see this crisis of meaning in the same way in, I don't know, like parts of Europe.
Sure.
India, again, there's such sparse data that I hesitate
Yeah.
to say anything. But yeah, so there might be a connection. I'm not sort of like, there must be a reason for like why people are hankering for more like sort of non-conventional, non-ordinary states of experience, like psychedelics or sort of meditation or like just esoteric philosophy. Like people, I think, seem to want more of that these days, given the amount of effort, like research effort that is being put into these things or the amount of capital being invested.
Yeah.
And they seem to suggest that there is something like a desire for what we might call spiritual experience.
Sure.
But again, I think we'll have to wait and see whether
Fair.
that is true or not.
Fair. I think one thing that you had mentioned before, and the idea of diagnoses, and people receive a diagnosis and it becomes their life, right? And it kind of relates to what we were talking about earlier, where the idea of belief, right? When you have a belief, when people are told certain things and they believe them, and then sometimes that belief can become so overpowering that it limits the scope of the thinking,
Yeah.
right? And then limits the scope of their ability to escape it. And then, this is a belief, right? Believing that, you know, you have depression, or believing that you have whatever the diagnosis is that same, it can be confining in that same way, I think. And then, it creates a loop, as you said, where the belief that you have depression keeps you in depression to some extent.
Yeah. This is like, this is a very sort of like a thorny sort of
Yes.
issue.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not trying to minimize diagnoses
course.
of depression.
Of course.
But I do think that a diagnosis can become a limiting belief, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
And I think that is that can happen.
Right.
And remember, the diagnosis is also like in current mental health sort of classification system.
Yeah.
The diagnosis is not very like watertight. So you, essentially, how you get diagnosed is you fill up a questionnaire, and then if you get a certain number of points answering those questions, you get diagnosed. So you can essentially have symptoms completely different from mine,
Mm-hmm.
and we can still be diagnosed with the same disorder.
Same disorder.
Right.
Right.
So I don't. So there are internal problems about like diagnostic problems when it comes to the classification system that is currently used.
Yes.
But again, think of diagnosis as, if it becomes a limiting belief, it's a problem.
Right.
But if it becomes a way of being able to make sense of certain responses that you have, like if it helps you to bring awareness of certain behaviors that were otherwise very automatic, such that now you can work on them, it's very helpful.
Mm.
So I would say that diagnoses are a point of departure as opposed to like a point of arrival. And too
Okay.
often we treat it as a point of arrival.
What
Because
do you
then,
mean by that?
Huh?
What do you mean by that?
Like, so if you're diagnosed with something, immediately I put you on like drugs,
Yes.
right? And hope that essentially some of the symptoms that you had would go away.
Right.
That's a point of arrival approach for me. Point of departure would be, okay, think of a diagnosis. And again, it might differ from which kind of disorders are we talking about.
Absolutely.
I think for psychotic disorders, it's a different scenario.
Absolutely.
But for depression, it would be more like, okay, maybe it should be a point of departure because it should make me more curious about knowing more about your life.
Right.
And knowing more about the psychosocial background. What is it that, what is it that has brought you to this stage? It should become a entryway for a more holistic, comprehensive understanding of a person's life that I think in most cases, I would say, resorting to recommending drugs would not be the first option.
Yes.
There are some things about depression that can be, I would say, not cured, but resolved
Yeah.
by psychosocial efforts,
Right.
which a lot of people are using in global mental health right
Right.
now. Can I find a way to get this person to hang out with their friends more?
Yeah.
Can I find a way for them to maybe partially reconcile about a conflict with their parents that has been simmering from them?
Yeah.
I think those kinds of efforts are a lot more productive when it comes to depression than immediately putting the person on drugs. And I think that happens way too quickly. It happens almost as an instinctive response.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the difference between point of departure and point of arrival.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Could you talk, as much as you're willing to share, a little bit about your own journey with mental health?
Yeah, I'm sure if I were to go to the therapist, I would be diagnosed with a bunch of things.
Sure.
But I have, for me, again, mostly because I don't think that much about myself.
Okay.
Like, there's a premise about mental health, which I personally sort of do not completely sort of agree with, which is that the problem is in yourself.
Mm.
I think the problem is if you think if you think about yourself too much. That's a different premise.
Yeah.
For me, if you have like if a problem seems very individual, and again, I'm not saying this again. Just the caveat is that different disorders have different trajectories, and if I had a very sort of virulent psychotic disorder, I would go to the therapist.
Right.
But when it comes to other things like personality disorders or mood disorders, for me, it's a certain kind of. Is there a way in which you can externalize a problem such that you can play around in the world in a different way as a way to engage your own problem, which you think might just be within yourself? Is there a way to like make the world a playground for you to resolve something that you think is within you?
Mm.
For me, things like learning often helps.
Right.
Things like, I love cooking. So if, like
Awesome.
when I'm having like a series of sort of episodes in which I don't feel up to the mark or I feel down, I will just go and buy a new cookbook and just cook through all the recipes in it.
Yeah.
There are certain things that I really love doing. I love learning about watchmaking. So I'm just going to go and learn more about
that's cool.
watchmaking. I think, so for me, it's a way of like, and this is not deflection. I think a lot of people will think that I'm deflecting, dealing with my issues. The way in which I have thought about it is that most things that you think are within you are actually outside of you.
Okay.
And I think obsessing over yourself is often the root of all the problems that we think is within us. But if you think more about the world around you and how you can engage it differently, I think it makes the problem a little smaller, I would say. And this is again to go back to what I had mentioned about how I live my life spiritually, which is the world is a huge place.
Yeah.
I think there is something in it for everybody.
Yeah.
And the only way in which you'll find it is if you engage more of it in some ways. So that for me is always my first response. Which is, can I change something about the way in which I'm living my life or engaging the world, which might have some kind of downstream effect on my own mental health issue? And a lot of the times it works. I dance tango. The one thing that that you cannot do in tango is live in your head.
Mm.
The other person will have a horrible time if you are dancing with them and you're depressed.
Yeah.
They will sense it. And
Yeah.
they'll be like, what the hell is this person doing?
Yeah.
So for me, like finding those things for yourself that will make you get out of yourself is very important.
Right.
But whether it's cooking, whether it's tango, whether it's learning about watchmaking, whether it's learning about some other things, whether it's just reading. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something that I've experienced when I am in a depressive state, when I am feeling down, as you said, low.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think there is this, there's this idea that if I did certain things, I know I could get out of this, or at least somewhat, right? And there's a knowledge of like, I have an idea of how to do this.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I say that, it's hard to do those things.
Yeah.
Often it's not, but it almost feels like mentally there is this comfort in being in the pain because it feels, it's like normal.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've experienced this.
Yeah.
I think that it's been one of the hardest things for me, where it's like, I know I should be doing these things, right? I know I should be trying these things. I know how to get out to some extent, right? I know at least I know how to start getting out, right? But I almost don't want to, because I'm scared of, if I do, then am I no longer who I am? Because so much of who I am is this person, right? Who has these things, and it's what makes me, and what allows me to, in some ways, allows me to have these conversations, right? Because I have that experience.
Yeah.
And so if I'm getting out of it, then am I losing myself?
No, yeah, it's a funny thing that, you know, even, I mean, again, in our very secular culture, we still attribute a lot of significance to pain,
Yes.
as if it can be a transforming experience. Like,
Yeah.
you know, pain is gain, or what have
Yeah.
you. Like,
Yeah.
and I've always wondered, like, what about pain makes you think that it can be so transformative?
Mm.
It can change the person that
Mm.
you are. That seems to me like very embedded in like religious thinking, right?
Interesting.
Uh, but you're right in the sense that sometimes we get way too attached to the distress that we are
Yeah.
suffering from.
It's comfortable in a sense.
It's
right?
comfortable, and I think it's sometimes it's perhaps even important to stay with it,
Mm.
right? But at some point, you know, once you, for example, have dwelled in it enough, then you just try and snap out of it, and that's where you know all the things that you already need to do, right? Sometimes the initial impulse to do them can be hard.
Yeah.
That's where the therapeutics come in,
Yeah.
which is that you know what you need to do, you know who you need to go and speak with, you know what is it that will make you forget your distress for a
Yeah.
little bit of time. But how do you gather the motivation, that initial, like how do you jumpstart it,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's where therapy really helps.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's even one of those things where, like, and I'm a firm believer that we should all go to therapy because I
Yeah.
think that talk therapy is so important.
yeah,
Anyone who can and has access to it should.
yeah,
And yet, I don't go to therapy. I used to. I haven't
Yeah.
in a couple years. I know that I should. I've had friends that I've recommended
Yeah.
therapy to, and they've gone and seen positive results.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, I know I should do it.
yeah,
But in some ways, it feels like doing it is an acknowledgement of, one, that I need it, even though that's not necessarily true, because I think everybody needs
yeah,
it. And logically, I know that,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
it's not so
yeah,
simple, right?
yeah,
And two, that if I did go to therapy and it works, and I quote unquote become happier,
Mhm.
right? Not that that's really a thing, but that a concept of, you know, I become a new version of myself. Am I leaving something behind that is important, that allows me to be unique? That is me. That I'm escaping. That I'm, you know, I've escaped the pain.
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
dramatic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend falling in love with the version of yourself that is ill.
Yes.
You know,
Sure. But it's hard not to sometimes.
it's hard, yeah, but you know, I think there is a kind of hypnotic quality to it as well.
Yes.
Um,
I agree.
there's nothing that individuates a person more than their pain, right? You know, it's like there's that famous line from Leo Tolstoy, like all happy families are happy in the same way, but every unhappy family is unhappy in their own way. I think
Interesting.
you can say that same thing for individual people.
Very interesting.
All happy people are happy in the same way, but all unhappy people are unhappy in their own way.
Right.
Right. But I do think that, you know, it's, again, I don't recommend sort of, I wouldn't recommend attaching your sense of identity to the pain that you're undergoing.
Right.
I think that's where things become murky.
Right.
That's where, you know, things can spiral into more severe sort of symptom profiles
Right.
that I think can actually be very self-harming.
Yeah. I agree.
I do think everybody should go to therapy, but at some point when you're going to therapy, you will see that, again, I'm just talking about myself. I often become bored of hearing my own voice
Mm.
in therapy. And that's when I realized that I have hit my threshold of being able to talk about myself, because I don't obsess over myself in that same way,
Yeah.
right? So for me, at that point, I need to do something else besides talking about myself.
Right.
That is where I think, you know, I need to engage the world in a
Yes.
different way.
Yes.
I think therapy is great, but I do think everybody probably has their own barometer of when is it that it becomes,
You need to do something.
yeah, I'm not saying that you become cured or anything. Like
Right.
the first thing that you get rid of when you go to therapy is like this delusion of being cured or anything. But for me, it's the stopping point is when you realize that, oh, you know what, maybe you're not as like maybe all the things that you think are happening within you, you've already spoken about them, and nothing more is there to say. That for me is like the moment of realization where somebody should be like, okay, well, I need to find some other venue
Yeah.
to be able to. I need to play with an idea. I need to do something else. I need to teach my children, whatever, you know.
Right.
I think it can come in all kinds of ways. And I think that's where sort of, for me, therapy becomes at least provisionally suspended.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is not to say that I'm not going to return.
Yes.
But for now,
now,
I'm fine.
to change it up almost.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Change it up almost.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I end every podcast
Yeah.
with the same question. What are some words you choose to live by and
Okay.
why?
Okay. There are two.
Sure.
So one is a quote by this Japanese swordsman.
Oh, okay. Excited.
Miyamoto Musashi.
Okay.
He was a kenzai, which is the highest honor given to a Japanese swordsman.
Okay.
And he has this quote, which I absolutely sort of keep front and center in my mind all the time. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. I think a lot of the problems in our life comes from personalization.
Yes.
A lot of the curiosities about the world comes from engaging the world more.
Yes.
And I think, like the modern day version of what Musashi is saying is take it easy,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
But I do like that he has put both those thoughts in the same sentence,
Yeah.
which is that you can only think lightly of yourself if you think deeply about the world, and vice versa. The other one comes from one of my favorite writers. She is a Brazilian writer, Clarice Lispector.
Okay.
And she has this quote which basically says, freedom isn't enough. What I want doesn't have a name yet. And the reason why I keep going back to that particular quote is that you should be a little bit more confused about yourself. Like, I always sort of recommend people that don't be so clear about what you think you are. Be a little more confused, because you don't know what is moving you. If you think it's freedom, if you think it's success, like those are like really small things compared to what is actually moving you.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds mystical. That's my spirituality coming in. I think it's that of a mystic.
Sure.
But for me, what is very interesting about that quote is that freedom seems like a pretty trivial thing compared to the depth of the thing that is actually moving you in your life. And I want to keep that confusion about myself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yuvan.
This is awesome.